Sean mentioned that I'd be able to see myself on the screen when we were live and ready to go here.
Yep,
Oh, the
my mic's on.
mics are on? Yours is on?
There you go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sean. Good evening, everyone. I hereby call the Monday, August 14th, 2023 Cumberland Town Council meeting to order. Just a few items of business before we begin. Prior to the workshop, we had actually town council photos tonight, and thank you, Brenda, for sending the pictures from previous years around so we don't wear the exact same outfit. Very, very appreciative. We also had a really good workshop with a gentleman from the Westbrook Development Corporation to talk about affordable housing projects in various communities and kind of the practicality of how those get done. And so now the first item of business is the approval of the minutes from the July 24th, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Nope. All those in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Next up on the agenda is the manager's report. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our first item is an update on the senior property tax assistant payments. As you know, Whitney Miller, our communications director, has been leading that charge for several years now. And I've asked Whitney to come tonight to give you an update on how things went and where we stand to date. And there is an additional item at the bottom of your agenda tonight to authorize those payments under number 90. I'd like to talk a little bit more under that item because I know we have a busy agenda. So I'll turn right to you, Whitney, and you can give us an overview.
Absolutely. So I've been doing this for about 5 years. 4 or 5 years. This is my 5th one. This year we have so far about 211 residents that have qualified. We had another 1 or 2 today. I apologize. I'm on vacation, so I don't know exactly how many we had today, but a couple more. So we're getting a little higher than we were last year, actually. You'll see our total refunds for owners versus renters here. The average refund amounts, the lowest possible refund is $50. That is the people with the highest income. The highest refund is $750, and then you'll see the renters on there as well. As Bill mentioned, you guys will talk about this a little bit later, but right now, compared to where we were last year, we're giving about $4,600 more to renters. We have more renters involved than we ever had before, which I would credit completely to our active living director, Devin, who's really been sharing this information with everyone. But we're giving about $19,000 less to our homeowners. At this time last year, we were at $88,400 for our homeowners. So I think for Bill and I and everyone who participated in the program, we know that that's really coming from the fact that the top portion of the rebate for our homeowners is based on their tax increase, and the vast majority of people participating in this program had their taxes stabilized through the state. So that $19,000 in any other year, we would have been rebating to them. This year, the state is covering that increase for them. Next year will be a different story. So that's the really quick overview of where we're at. I expect that we'll get probably well over 220. We'll continue taking them for a few more weeks. So if anybody is watching this or knows someone and is over 70 years old, has been in town for over 10 years, has the combined household income, the AGI, under 91,000, please come and see Devin or myself. We are happy to still process those applications. But right now we are about 30 people higher than we were at this time last year.
Whitney, can you say you're still processing those? When's the deadline for that?
Typically we process them till the beginning of October or so. The hope is really to get people their check before their September tax bill is due, so the sooner the better. If people could just stop in and see either one of us, it takes less than 5 minutes. Any other questions I can answer?
Questions? No, I think that's
Awesome.
fantastic. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing on the manager's report, I have a few other things. Our solid waste RFP is now out on the street. We are hopeful to be back to the council in September with a recommendation and the selection of a vendor. As you know, we'll be going to an automated collection process, which will require containers and basically a new type of truck that will pick up our trash at the curbside. It is a 5-year contract we're looking to bring forward to you, and I believe we are trying to figure out what is the best scenario, because some folks are just not going to be able to deal with a 65-yard container to get that from their garage or wherever they store their trash to the curb. So we're trying to balance that out with the smaller containers for some folks, and how do you qualify for that? Falmouth is already going through that right now, and North Yarmouth is as well. They're already in process with starting that. Their truck has been delayed about a year. I anticipate ours will be in the same boat, but maybe closer behind. Maybe it's just 6 months, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take some education. By awarding it in September, at least we can get started with the process and get the education plan in place so that we're ready by July 1st of next year to start the new process. It's a big change. It really is, and we're hopeful that we'll have the answers for you in September. We're reaching out to the staff at EcoMaine as well, because recycling, we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with the $400,000 loss in revenue. That loss will come because it'll be very difficult to enforce if things are in a green Cumberland trash bag, because there's no one flipping off the lid on your container. The trash can gets lifted by a mechanical arm and it's dumped in the top of the container, so no one sees if they're clink bags or the green Cumberland bags. So we're a little bit concerned about that and how the council wants to deal with that. We'll have a couple of ideas, but we'll have plenty of time to implement it. You know, the bags will be in force until next July, and then we'll figure out what's next after that. It could be anything from a cost to the container or subscription fee, or how we implement it. But we also don't want to basically have the enforcement of the bags cost more than the bags themselves. So that can be a problem. Town hall paving, we're going to be starting some paving work and reconstruction work around Town Hall. That'll probably, the construction work will start in about 2 weeks. On Wednesday, you will see, it's going to look very funny, but you'll see a paving company in here very early in the morning, basically paving across the front sidewalk of the Town Hall. That sidewalk has been buried through frost action and through a whole bunch of things, but we're going to be repaving and rebuilding that sidewalk, so there'll be a new stretch of pavement all the way across. We're going to set the new curbing on top of, and basically fix the deficiencies in the parking lot. This whole project is probably going to be a work in progress for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So there's going to be limited parking in the front of the building. All employees will be asked to park in the rear of the building so the public can access Town Hall, and you'll be able to always get into Town Hall. It just will be a little bit slower at times. But we'll be doing the actual larger paving most likely on Fridays and Saturdays when the town office is closed. Road paving, we are starting officially on Wednesday. We'll be dealing with the roads off Greeley Road and working our way around town. We were supposed to start tomorrow, but as you know, it's supposed to rain again. So it's been a big challenge with rain this summer, and we're very happy that we're able to get this going. Main Street sidewalks, difficult project as well, primarily weather as well as materials. Many of you know but I'll just share it with the public as well. We are trying to remove that, I'll be careful on my adjective and description of the fence around the Congregational Cemetery, but that chain and bar look, we're trying to replace it with a granite curb that basically surrounds the entire cemetery. I've been working with Bob Story for about a year on this. The supplier of the granite curbing basically has told us it won't land here until October. So that is going to impede the construction of that sidewalk until then, because we really need to have that in place to rebuild that sidewalk properly and make it look good like we obviously want it to in the oldest cemetery we have in town. So it may be a little bit slower, but I think in the end it'll definitely be worth the wait. So that's why some of the progress has been slow. They worked this Saturday to get a bunch of sidewalks done as well. They are not allowed to work after 7 a.m., between 7 and 9 a.m. Main Street and Tuttle Road are kind of closed off so the buses can get through and we're not impeding school. But they'll continue to battle through that, and I'm hopeful that, by the late fall will be completed. And then Bruce Hill Road Waterline RFP update. I'll be looking to send that out to consultants here, hopefully in the next week or so, primarily to look at kind of a phased project approach. We are definitely in need to improve our hydrant and fire protection system in West Cumberland. That is currently being pumped out to West Cumberland via Blanchard and Skillins Road. That has caused homeowner issues along the way, as well as issues in our hydrants. And with a water tank in phase one, it may help a lot of the people that are having the worst water issues out on Bruce Hill, but it will also help all of West Cumberland with a very positive flow of water out to that section of town. Water pressure is all about elevation. You've got to get to the right elevation to make it work properly. And we have to get to elevation 410, and the only way that exists is really on top of Blueberry Hill. So the project we had hoped for that was we were going to piggyback on the Gorham and Wyndham project that never really came to fruition. We'll continue to push that as well while we look at what the alternatives are if we have to go alone on this project, which most likely we will. That will be paid through our TIF funds. It is in our TIF projections for funding, and more to come as those RFPs come in. The council will interview those engineers, we'll listen to their proposals, and hopefully we'll get some good ideas from that process as well. And the final thing I did want to talk about is the article in the Press Herald this weekend about the elderly couple that was battling our healthcare system. Devin Galvin, she's a rock star, and I don't care. That lady has just done an amazing job since she's taken over this process. She is working with them now to get back onto Medicare. She's helping them through what you heard tonight through Tyler, the telemedicine project where you can get online and talk with a physician. And with that process, I think we're going to be able to help them get in a better direction and get those services back to the people that need them most. And of course, while she was there, she said, what else do you need? And now we're going to be soliciting help for a sump pump for the folks too. So if you know plumbers, give me a call, because a lot of people want to help. And I would just encourage people to be respectful of their privacy as well. There were several threads on Facebook, one very not so nice and one very nice. There were lots of great ideas on some threads there that talked about how people can help and how we can, GoFundMe pages, and there was a whole real good list of positive things that could happen. But these folks are private, obviously, and they want to keep their privacy, and that article kind of was was published a little bit later than the process they're in right now. I think they're on a better path, and I think thanks to Devin, Devin had already been talking to them before that even came out on Sunday. So good awareness, a good thing to bring out, because it's not just happening to these folks, it's happening to many. So this has a more positive ending than many do, but it never hurts to call and contact the town. We can do things. We can't do everything. We don't have the social service agencies within our community, but we do have a lot of volunteers, and neighbors have really stepped up around them too to help as well. So that was a really positive turnout. We're also looking to get into the next round of grants for the telehealth meeting services. Is Brian still here? Oh, I think he left. Brian was big into that as well. When he was at the fire department, he was basically dealing with community paramedicine and the telemedicine services as well. So we're hoping to be in that next round, and we're also checking to see how do we skip over that if we can move forward more quickly, because we do have rooms down at the recreation center at Valhalla that could be set up for telemedicine. And that really, it's the privacy area you need. You just need a Wi-Fi connection, a way to connect, show people how to connect, and they can deal with it right there. And that's really, It's not much more than that, other than the licensing from the state that we can do this. So Devin is working on that as well, and we're going to get her back here this fall and just share some of the success stories that she has had so far, and it's been growing. She's got 65 to 70 people every time she has a senior lunch now. Things are growing, trips are growing. It's really kind of kicking off and into high gear. Really happy to see. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Manager. I appreciate the update on the Press Herald article. I think we've got some comments here at the
There
end.
was
Please.
one more bullet under your report, and that was an update on Bruce Hill Road RFP.
Yeah, that was what I was talking about, the water line. The engineers will, I'll be putting that out,
Okay.
and the engineers will be coming
Okay.
back to you.
Okay.
We were talking more about the water tank in the first phase, and then the other components of the neighborhoods in maybe the second and third
Okay.
phase. As you know, that project was huge. It was over $7 million. So if we can break it into smaller pieces, we might get some progress, and we might get help to the people who need it most right now in that very first phase. So that's, keeping my fingers crossed,
Okay.
that'll come up in the RFP. Thank you.
Councilor Eads, do you have
A couple quick questions, Bill. First one, has the price of asphalt, is that stabilized?
Yeah, somewhat. It's where we started out high, like it ended last year. It's come down a little bit, but it's the mixture. The price of asphalt is going to remain high, but it really only can constitute 5 to 6% of the price. So when it goes up and you see the crazy numbers, remember that's only 5 to 6% of what we use, and it's not great. But our prices have been locked in since the beginning. Glidden Paving has historically worked with us, locked our prices in the first, and guaranteed it till the next July.
Right.
So they've been doing a great job.
The other question I had, do we have a piece of land up on Bruce Hill that we can put a tower?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. Remember, you were on the council when Fred Kinney donated a piece of his property. That piece never made it into the conservation easement purposely for the Knights Pond Preserve. We basically held that piece out because we basically said, we're going to need something someday. We'll be working with the Land Trust. I have told the Land Trust over time. I've got a meeting with Penny Ashman, I think it's next week, or this week, I'm not sure. Next week, thank you, Brett, to talk about that as well, because that'll be a big piece of it. That can actually probably enhance that property as well, because we'll need to have access up one side or the other to get to the tower. So that could improve access to the start of the preserve, through that hill. But that's a great point, Mike. We did keep that out. That is not a part of the preserve purposely.
Great, thank you. All set.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Manager. We now move to public discussion. Public discussion is for comments on items that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Rebuttal comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Public discussion topics may be brought up, again, under new business for further council discussion. So before we invite folks up to speak, I would just respectfully ask, one of the last agenda items we have tonight, the second to last, is 23-089. It's regarding setting the public hearing date for August 28th. I would just respectfully ask if you do have comments on that topic to just reserve those for that agenda item so we can kind of keep all the comments in one section. But for anyone else that has public comments, we would welcome you to come up to the stand and just kindly introduce yourself and your name and where you live.
Pete Wilson, 18 Oak Ridge Road. Excuse me. This will be disjointed, but you'll get the message. Used up 10 seconds. I think that the overlays are being overused. I think we should respect zoning that exists. I think we should look at whatever old overlays aren't over the dam, so to speak, and stop them. There's an old song, you don't know what you have until it's gone. Another line of it is, they paved paradise and put in a parking lot. The 70 units on the 40 acres in West Cumberland, to me, that's nonsense. That's not helping the community. That's helping the person who's selling the land, and it's helping the developer. The rest of us, very highly likely, are going to pay higher taxes because the property taxes won't cover the kids that are in the development. Also, it's got to wreak havoc with the school district planning for the year. Like how many kids are going to come in here? We don't have room enough for the kids that we have. Got to hire more teachers. How many more do we have to hire? Anyway, these overlays just hurt us, and they do not help the community. That's a statement I'll make. And we ought to be here to help the community, to not degrade it. Like, ask yourself, why did you come to this town? School system, rural nature, community. Overlays don't help any of those. They hurt all of them. Plus, additional police force needed and town services. Okay, so that I said that pretty quickly. My second item is I had an issue with respect to beavers being trapped on Knight's Pond, and I forgot who it was. I asked to have an item put into the town crier announcing a meeting where I'd gather people and discuss it, and I was told, oh no, we can't do that, that's political. In my view, that's silly. We ought to be able to put things like that in the town crier. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? And just a gentle reminder that any comments relating to 23-089 under that agenda item. So does this have to do with the affordable housing?
It has to do with affordable housing, but not that specific issue.
Okay, please proceed.
Yeah, it's not on the agenda.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
You a little nervous?
No?
Oh, well, you acted it. So I am here to talk about affordable housing in general, and the 71 or 2 thing out there and the Twin Towers that are going up in the village here. I'm calling the 72 out there the sardine can. I've got, names for both. Bill Shane said something tonight that concerns me. He said we don't have the social services for some things to do in this town for people that need them. That tells me that's an indication that we're going to need them for the people that come in for affordable housing, and that's going to mean tax increases. In addition to more police, more fire, additions to buildings. I don't know. I don't think, or you can tell me if you did the Affordable Housing Task Force or the Town Council do any study on what this is going to, how it's going to affect the school, affect the taxpayers, and affect the tax rates in this town? We need to take care of the current taxpayers, not future ones, first. This is a much bigger issue than people in this town are given. I don't think you've got the town with you on this. I hear much more negative up at this mic than positive. I think the town council is pushing this through. I don't think you have the town with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else like to address the council on something not on the agenda? Oh, yes. Please, one of our members of our community, Terry Maloney Kelly, was not able to be here tonight. I would just respectfully ask Brenda, she emailed the council earlier, and thank you for reminding me of that. If we could include those comments in the public record for this, that'd be great. Okay, seeing no other comments, we will close public discussion and move on to legislation and policy. First item on the agenda is 23-084 to hold a public hearing to consider and act on the adoption of the Twin Brook Recreation Area Forest Management Plan and Invasive Plant Control Practice Plan as recommended by the town forester. This is a very long-term project that the LCC has been undertaking with the town forester, and I'm going to kindly ask Vice Chair Filson to kind of update us on where that process is and what we're looking at this evening.
I would love to tee this up. So for folks that weren't at the last meeting, we had a fantastic report from Paul Larrabee, who's our town forester, in conjunction with Sally Stockwell and Gordon Lichter, who are the, they make the magic happen on the Lands and Conservation Commission's forestry subcommittee. And so they presented kind of two documents that are really designed to work in tandem together. The invasive plant management plan for Twin Brook and the forestry management plan for Twin Brook. So the way in which they're sort of, I'll take a step back, but these two documents are really kind of a reflection of the town's guiding principles around forest management. And they've been updated, these plans, to really address the invasives, which if many of you are walking around your backyard, you know, the buckthorn, oh my God, bittersweet, Japanese knotweed, you know, and they're beginning to really take foot in Twin Brook to the extent that we as a council were able to do a walkthrough with the town forester back in May, because it's wild how severe kind of these horrendous invasives are and kind of what they're doing to kind of that larger Twin Brook property. So basically kind of the recommendation of these two plans is that the invasive kind of plan, which is detailed in a document that you guys can all see on the town website, the invasives really need to be addressed first before we can do any of that active kind of forestry management, harvesting, anything like that. And I won't go too much into the details, but the idea kind of being that if you cut a lot of the trees down, it introduces sun into the canopy, and then all of a sudden your invasives are exploding. So that's sort of the long and the short of it. We do have Mike Schwint here who can keep me honest if I missed anything, but hopefully that kind of gives you guys an overview of what the kind of plans are.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And if anyone has comments, please share them. But Mr. Manager, I did have a question. One of the things that I think we talked about was taking this report, as Tig mentioned, it's quite long and detailed, and operationalizing it a little bit. And did Chris Bolduck meet with the town forester and figure something out? Where are we at on that process?
I think Chris met with Mike and with Paul Larrabee, our town forester, and they have come up with a plan and schedule on how to move forward, and we're going to try to do something this fall. Paul's plan originally was for next year, but I think we want to get a kind of a jump start and get something going this year. I think the bigger conversation was for the grant funding, and if there were more grant funds available, Councilor Filson and I talked today about that. How do we best implement to get the biggest bang for the buck? So that still will probably be addressed as we get further down the process, and probably, I don't know if Mike has any input on that, but I know Paul was working hard on that, and if we can get more money and we can get more done, that would be great. Our issue is that it's just timing. Down two guys at Public Works. The mechanical piece is the easy piece. When you have to do the hand pulling stuff, it's a little bit more labor intensive. Both can be done, but the most expensive part will still be the spraying. So we can do probably 5 to 10 acres a year if it's mechanically done, and we can spray in a pretty, almost like a line going across, if you will. But when it becomes to a spot here and a spot here, and you're trying to do it in 30 acres of forest, it gets to be a lot more time consuming. So the more resources we have, the more we can get done. So more to come, I guess, on that. That's the best way I can describe it.
Any comments? Did you have something? Councilor
There is
King,
a calendar sort of in their report of what and when and where and who.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to applaud them on how comprehensive that report is, and I'm thankful every day I never became a copy editor, because I could not. I tried several times to get through. I pride myself on reading every word to prepare myself for these meetings. I'm sorry I didn't get through absolutely every chart or detail. I was having a hard time with those line charts, and I was trying to imagine them maybe like a canopy or something. I don't know what, the charts with the different, anyway, it is incredibly thorough, and I'm confident that Mike has read every word.
Great.
Do you want to share your goat findings?
My what?
Goat findings?
Counselor Filson.
I was just saying on top of that, Shirley, because I agree. I think that Paul also mentioned that when he put this report together, it was going to set us up really well to get money from the state. And that's really, really exciting. And kind of the dialogue that Bill and I had today was, really understanding if we can get a solid pot of money. There's, because we do have 3 folks internally who can do the spraying, but Paul had recommended that we also kind of look to see if we could bring in an outside vendor as well. And if we get a big pile of money, we're going to be able to get more done. And it seems like there is a lot to be done, not just on this property, but all of our forests.
There are 3 goat rental agencies in York County. I have not lost track of
talk
that.
about it.
3, and it's actually a national thing. Like if you go out into the Midwest, there are a lot more goat rental companies. But I have not lost track of that, and I do intend to stop by the Cooperative Extension Office in Falmouth and see if Cumberland County has any. I don't know. The Sunflower Farm people were looking to give away baby goats.
Yeah, that's an option.
Trying to convince Jeff to add some goats to his cow herd.
Any other comments from the council?
quick.
Please, Counselor.
Ted, do you see the impression I get from the land conservation that they're anti-logging? Would you say that's correct, or are there?
I don't get that impression. I get the impression that we are all terrified of invasives. And that was, Paul, if you recall, he said, so I was rewatching it today, and he's like, invasives are what keep me up at night, and this is what scares me. And to the extent that our only option, once it gets to a point, is to grind it all down and replant everything. And I don't think a lot of people want to use Roundup. I think people are also terrified of Roundup, but when it's Roundup or lose your forests, that's not a great position to be in.
Right.
And so, no, I think I don't get that feeling at all. I think it's more, we have these beautiful forests. How are we going to keep them and prevent them from just being totally overtaken? This stuff is no joke.
I just worry, about the old growth in there, especially the old softwood growth, because it's not healthy. It doesn't promote a lot of wildlife because the canopy's so high. It basically gets to a certain age, just dies and rots and falls. And the one thing about logging does, it just keeps a healthy forest, because it's nothing but a big garden. And that's just kind of the attitude I've seen from a couple of members of the board, is that we just don't want logging. And I was looking at the recommendation, is they're talking not doing anything till 2033. That's a long ways off to not have any for a big piece of property. That's my concern with going forward with the plan. So that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I do recall from the meeting that there are certain, some of the trees are in better shape than others, right? Depending on the type of tree, and some are appropriate for logging and some are not appropriate for logging. I'm not the forester though, so kind of, I wouldn't be comfortable giving you a kind of, especially if we're talking about certain areas. But Paul did say that kind of the most, especially when it comes to these invasives, the best approach is to start with the areas that are manageable, and then kind of, if you can, work to those more complex areas. And I think some of the areas that were kind of it comes to a point with those invasives, Mike, that you can't even log anymore, because he was saying that the vines of the bittersweet are basically holding these trees up, and you can't even get in there to cut them down because they're so I don't know, I would follow up with him on it, but I personally didn't get that feeling, but I think, feel free to dig in.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, of course.
Questions? Any other comments from the council? Councilor Vail.
Well, I certainly support the motion that we're going to have here to implement this plan. I think one of the key takeaways of this is the importance of town-wide education, statewide education. We all heard in the news the other day about a mile a minute. I didn't use the right phrase, but it was something like that. Plant that came into Maine that it grows up, I think, a foot a day, an invasive species. So last year I did an addition on Harris Road, and the person owns a pretty significant piece of land, but interestingly, as I looked down into the woods, and actually one day had a chance to walk into the woods, just filled with invasive species and vines and stuff that you really don't want. So it's not, it's forest land, but it's not healthy forest land, and so we need to, change some of our practices. And anyways, I think we have a good plan in front of us, and I don't need to comment any further.
Thank you. Anything else from the council? This is a public hearing, so if anybody from the public would like to address the council on this issue, please step up and just state your name and where you're from. That'd be great. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Levitt, and I'm a Cumberland resident. I am a member of the Forestry Subcommittee of the Lands and Conservation Committee, and I'll let Todd speak for himself, but this is also a fellow committee member, Todd Ontel. You can say hi.
Yep. Hello. Todd Ontel, 73 Gray Road, so I'm in Cumberland as well, and been a part of the Forestry Subcommittee for about a year and a half now.
Gordon and Sally weren't able to be here tonight. I'm not sure. I texted Paul early in the day to see if he was going to be here. I didn't hear from him. So Todd and I just wanted to be here just in case anybody had any questions that we might be able to answer. I'm not sure. Mike, to your concerns, Paul's recommendations were based on a lot of that data and those charts that Shirley was referring to, and it's a lot to digest. I understand that. But based on the data, when Paul went out and looked at the forest and what we had, how many trees and how old and how big and different species, et cetera, he then came up with what he thought was a correct plan for the town based on his education and training. So the guiding principles have also caused us to look at things a little differently in town in a nice way. And one of the things that the older trees do provide us with is they're not always not healthy, but a lot of times they'll provide shelter for different species of animals, and also can provide seed for younger trees. So they do have a value in the forest, and one of the things, and Todd can jump in, also, I think we were looking for more of an uneven aged stand. An uneven aged stand just means that you have 100-year-old trees and 50-year-old trees and 20, they're not all one age, and there's lots of benefits in that diversity. So logging is a tool, just like herbicide is a tool, and other things. It's a tool that Paul would employ when necessary and when appropriate. And this darn invasive species thing has become such an issue that the committee realized that it would not be responsible of us to look to harvest, and that has never been a goal. If you look at our mission statement and our goal, we state right in it that we're not in it to make money, that is not. Be nice to make ends meet. If a harvest costs some certain amount of money and we could generate that would be nice. But that's not really a big factor. Our reason for harvesting is environmental. It's to practice good forestry, to improve our species diversity, to increase our water quality, particularly at Twin Brook, where there's a lot of water, things like that. So we realize that the invasive species is a big issue. It's been an issue at Rhines, and we really have to get ahead of it now. We're going to get behind the curve that our forests will not have any young trees growing. You want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I'll just back up a lot of what John said there, and I really appreciate the concern about the health of the forest and how we can maintain that. And, you know, as John mentioned, you know, active forest management, logging, forest harvest, these are all terms that are relate to the tools that, you know, as stewards of these lands that we use. And so I appreciate the concern about maintaining healthy forests, healthy trees. You know, trees, the old trees, those large hemlocks and white pines, you know, they are generally in good shape out there. They're in good condition. If you look at the stand inventory data that Paul collected and all those numbers and charts that he has really kind of tell a story of, you know, for the most part, the biggest threat to maintaining the health of that forest is those invasive species. And so that's really, as a subcommittee, that's really our primary concern. You know, when the data, the inventory assessment that Paul, the forester, comes up with shows that, you know, over the long rotations of that we use in managing forests, which are decades and decades, you know, 10, 20, 30 years, when it's the right time to go in and do some of that active management, you know, then he would recommend that based on the information that he provided. But what the information shows is that those invasive species are a huge concern. So his recommendations and the entire committee, you know, all supported his recommendations that, you know, the active management and harvesting of trees is not a wise move for maintaining or improving the health of the forest, given that those invasive species are established there.
Great. Councilor Kopp, I think that's a
John,
question.
can you remind the council what you did as a professional career? Some of the new people might not know.
Well, yeah,
I'm interested.
I'm not sure if it's, well, for you, I'll do it, Ron. I was, about 9 years ago, I retired after 23 years as the local forest ranger for the Department of Conservation. And Todd has an impressive resume, too.
I work for the Forest Service for, thanks. I work for the Forest Service for the national headquarters in Washington, D.C. in our Sustainability and Climate Office.
Well, aren't we lucky
Thank
to
you.
have
Yeah,
you?
very lucky.
So we have some
Much
pretty
more
known.
impressive resume.
Yeah.
No, both of you, I appreciate both of you coming up to the microphone tonight to give a little bit more context to the
Thank you for your consideration. It's
report.
been a lot of hard work, and it would be really neat. This will be the first time, I think, that the town has ever had management plans written by the same forester for all our forested parcels, which is really be a big step. So
Yep.
hopefully you all will approve this. Thank you.
Yep.
Could I
Please,
also add that
Councilor Storking.
John's been advocating for this for 12, 15 years. He was on the Twinbrook Advisory Committee, which no longer exists, but we were meeting a decade ago with the SAPI Small Forest management team, and so John's been a tremendous advocate, and thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you both for all your hard work on the subcommittee, and also Mike Schwint, thank you for all of your leadership and hard work on the LCC, kind of helping to push this stuff through.
Thank you very much.
Brought it to life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this topic? Mr. Schwint, I see you rising in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, Mike Schwint, Chair of the Your Lands and Conservation Commission. Counselor, yes, I did read every one of the words
I'm sure
twice.
you did.
It took more than a couple of minutes. That's one of the good things about being retired. You can do that sometimes. I listened and I watched and I learned as I watched the Forestry Subcommittee review and debate these documents. And first they argued amongst themselves, then they argued with the town forester. And I think we came out with about as good a report as we're going to find anywhere. These plans are a conservative approach to managing Twin Brook, incorporating the guiding principles that you adopted a couple of years ago, along with forest management techniques that to me make sense for the long haul. But then the final decision is not up to me. The commission signed off on it unanimously. The final decision is up to you, and I ask you that you approve both documents so we can put them in place. So thank you. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, as an aside, Councilor Kopp, a while back you asked about something to show how invasive, so we can have examples of it. I finally figured out, I think, a possibility. It'll probably show up out front next week.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any other comments from the public or from the council on this agenda item?
Ron, a good way to identify invasives are after the leaves fall, they're the only thing that remains, so they don't follow our cycles.
I've learned a lot because I've gotten a lot of them off of my own property, so.
We're gonna get you a goat, so you're gonna be the
Yeah,
guinea pig
and I
on
don't
that.
have any goats, Shirley, so. I do have a lot of wild deer, but.
Okay, if no more discussion on this topic, I would accept a motion from someone,
Mr. Chair, I'll give you a motion.
please.
I move to adopt the Twin Brooks Recreation Area Forest Management Plan and Invasive Plant Control Practice Plan as recommended by the town forester.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is 23-085, to hold a public hearing to consider and act on the recommendation of Goral Palmer Engineers to make the intersection of Tuttle and Middle Road a four-way stop. This has been tabled to the August 28th meeting, but I believe Councilor Story King.
I move to table to the August 28th meeting.
Very efficient. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a second as well? Any discussion on tabling?
Discussion on
Oh,
tabled
excuse me.
items.
There we go. Robert's Rules of Order in action.
Keeping you sharp.
I like it. Okay. All those in favor to table? Unanimous. We will discuss that on the 28th. Next item is 23-086, to authorize the town manager to accept payment for delinquent and current taxes in the amount of $7,000 on property identified as tax map R07, lot 69, and prepare and execute a lien discharge for the fiscal year 20 foreclosed tax lien. Mr. Manager, please let me know if I'm missing anything here, but I believe this is an instance in which a resident had some back taxes for the fiscal year 2020. They are now making a rather large lump sum payment to cover the outstanding balance from 2020, as well as a portion of that going towards the fiscal year 21 outstanding balance. But that also still leaves a balance owed of a little over $1,000. But I think the motion before us tonight is to potentially accept that so that that prior year's lien can be discharged for 2020.
That is correct.
Okay. Any discussion on this or comments from the public? I think this has generally been the council's policy that if someone has an outstanding tax liability, that we want to encourage them to come forward to make those payments, and I think this is a good way to do that. So if there's not any discussion, I would accept a motion.
I'll give you one. I move to authorize the town manager to accept payment for delinquent and current taxes in the amount of $7,000 on property identified as tax map R07, lot 69, and prepare and execute a lien discharge for the FY20 foreclosed tax lien.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this topic? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Next item is 23-087, to authorize the town manager to accept payment for delinquent taxes in the amount of $300 on property identified as tax map U19, lot 18, and to authorize a payment plan for future delinquent tax payments. It's my understanding that this is also a resident who was struggling with some property tax payments and has been making regular monthly payments to the town. And the goal here is to not only accept 2 previous payments, but also to approve the payment plan process. So I guess you wouldn't have to come back to the council every single month to authorize the acceptance of those funds. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Any comments from the council on this? I think this follows generally the same principle. Okay, I would accept a motion if someone's got one.
I move to authorize the town manager to accept payment for delinquent taxes in the amount of $300 on property identified as tax map U19 Lot 18 and to authorize a payment plan for future delinquent tax payments.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion?
I have a question. If we authorize this plan, does that mean we don't have to approve it every month it comes through? That would be good.
Yeah.
And less, provide them more privacy.
I think so too. I think it also takes it off the docket every single month.
Excellent.
Yep. That's great. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Looks to be unanimous. Okay, 23-089, to set a public hearing date of August 28th to consider.
You missed
Excuse
an
me.
item.
Oh, excuse me, sorry about that. 23-088, thank you, Counselor Kopp, to hold a public hearing to consider and act on a medical marijuana registered caregiver license renewal for SSJA LLC, owner Jacob Atchison, located at 217 Gray Road. Mr. Manager, I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
It's real quick. This was the third property identified in that zone when we allowed for these medical caregivers, and he was not ready at the time the other two were. He is now ready. He was told that his license would expire the same time the other two would, so all three would come before you at the same time, next time, under the same criteria that the ordinance committee had recommended to the council several months ago. So he will be back 3 months ahead of time, but he understands that they're all in the same cycle.
Councilor Story King, do you have a question?
I was looking over the materials and I have a number of questions. First of all, in the materials we received, the state license is not included, just his application for the state license is included. On page 95 in our packet, there's a permit, but without it, it doesn't indicate, there was a building permit, but it wasn't indicated that it was inspected. On page 97 in our packet, the state informed him that he still needed scale certification before he got his permit. And on page 99, it indicates he's asking for an increase in the number of plants he can grow, which doubles his previous. And that's confirmed on page 100 when the status is changed from renew to no. So I'm not sure it's ready. At least according to our materials, it doesn't look ready.
Well, let's table it and we'll bring it back in 2 weeks. I don't think there's any rush for this, so,
Yep.
and I'll get the answers.
Where's Mike? I read every
I was
word of
just,
that one.
I was just about to say that.
You missed them.
Yeah.
No, we'll get this, we'll get back to you and we'll figure out the missing pieces. That's
All
pretty
right.
simple. Thank you.
I
You're
think that makes a lot of sense, and thank you for the fine-tooth review there.
It wasn't hard. The new was highlighted in red. I always, zoom right in on those highlights.
Okay, so is there a motion to table unless there's other comments here, I guess?
Okay,
I move to table.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, agenda item 23-089 to set a public hearing date of August 28th to consider and act on authorizing the town manager to prepare a request for proposals for an affordable housing project to be constructed on the town-owned property on Drown Road. This is a public hearing. We had a workshop earlier this evening with Westbrook Development Corporation. Tyler Norad came, and I appreciate him coming and putting some kind of reality to how these projects go. I think it sounds like this process obviously started with us identifying an issue like every community has with a lack of affordable housing, followed by forming a task force, which then spent several months meeting, coming up with plans and strategies for how do you address those, what are the legal mechanisms and tools that you have to make an affordable housing project and keep it affordable, followed then by kind of identifying this potential lot of land on Drown Road, followed then by saying, well, we want to make sure that this is addressing the right market in our community. And so we had a consultant prepare a very long and detailed report on which income levels and which age groups would best be served, I guess, by an affordable housing project in our town. And I think the next step is trying to figure out how you take all that data and turn it into a real visual project of what that might look like. And I think one of the things we're trying to do now is kickstart that process to authorize the town manager to go out to developers and say, well, this is generally what we're looking for. What do you come back with, and what's your proposal? But the agenda item tonight, just to be very clear, is just to set the date to talk about all of those things. And that is 2 weeks from now. But please, Councilor Reeds.
So Mark, what are we sending out? I mean, I don't think we've come to a consensus as a council what we want. I mean, you may have, and I think you've got a majority to do something, but I don't think we have sat down and said, we want to do mixed housing, we want to do seniors. So I guess if we're going to send the town manager to go forward, shouldn't we, as a council, come up and say, this is what we want? I mean, we would do it with any project. This is what we're looking to do. Does anybody have interest in doing what but we don't have it. And you know, we're asking the manager to go forward by the 28th to send out an RFP when we don't have it. That's all. And I'm not trying to kick the can down the road on this, because, I mean, I've talked to you, Mark, a number of times, and, you know, I would like to see senior housing. There's a documented need for that, but we haven't come, as a council, with a consensus on doing that. So that's, and I don't know if we do it in a workshop maybe before the next meeting, to say, listen, here are our 3 choices, here are our 4 choices. Let's pick 1, pick 2. I just want to give him, if we're going to give him some marching orders, let's make sure they're specific.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. So we do have, oh, please, Councilor Vail, go ahead.
I think Mike is right there where I was. And so my question was going to be to Bill is, did you get enough information tonight at the table to maybe come up with a couple of proposals that we might look at? Or would you like further direction? Because I'm happy to provide further direction right now to help in that arena.
No, I think the 28th was intended to kind of finalize the percentages, finalize what we thought we could put into an RFP, and then have the experts come back to us. There are 4 or 5 development companies that will come back to you with different types of schemes, different types of ideas. If you're saying, I want a percentage of each one of these categories, let the experts basically come back and show us what type of state and federal fundings could leverage this to make it happen. And Tyler, as you heard tonight, basically said it's going to be challenging. So it may not all pencil out at Drown Road. It may have to be in different areas of town. We don't know that until we ask. And that's my point, is that we're not going to figure out what the answer is until we put it out to the experts. The last time we did this, we rejected all 3 proposals. So it isn't a done deal until you decide what you want to do when those RFPs come back, when you review them, and then decide what's best for the community. And you may not like any of them. So that's just the first step.
I understand that, and I'm supportive of that, but I do think that we should have some broad brush strokes applied to it. We're looking for a mix of housing. We're not looking for just workforce housing. We're not looking for asylum-seeking housing or emergency housing or senior housing. I'm looking for a mix of housing, and I think that I want to articulate that so when you do put that RFP together, that we don't come back with something that doesn't closely approximate what my desires are. And hopefully that's the same as the council. So does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I'm a little bit more narrowly focused. I'm not in favor of some of the housing you just mentioned, Bob. I am in favor of, really, for me, 100% senior housing. And the point being, you're where you are, I'm where we are. Bailey may be someplace else. And I think we as a council need to give Bill some specific marching orders, and that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and I will also just add that we do have, oh, please, you had a comment, please?
No, I'm with Mike on this one. I think that I still feel like we need to have a deep dive conversation. We've talked with the person who generated the report for us, but we haven't talked about what that report means to us when we read it. You know, I'm not sure that report, I am convinced actually that report doesn't support what we're proposing for moving forward. And it's not just, I just want to go on the record that I'm not concerned just about seniors being able to afford their taxes moving forward, but the entire community being able to afford their taxes moving forward. So what are the unintended tax implications if we move forward with a project? It might be, no, it doesn't cost us a thing. Nothing's free, first of all. And then what are the unintended consequences? If a house has 4 students in it and it turns over and it has 4 students still in it, that's a net gain of 0 in the school system, right? But if you have a house that turns over, you know, with, that didn't have any students, and then you add more students in an apartment, then you've got those students in addition to the 4 that have moved into the house that had previously had students in it. I know that example isn't totally clear, but when I dug into the data in the report, there are 13% of households in Cumberland that earn less than $50,000 a year. We can say that those might be retired people, but they also might be moms and dads where mom has decided to stay home with the kids because daycare is too expensive, or they're working part-time when they used to work full-time. There are 1,122 households in Cumberland that make under $100,000. That's 38% of our households that make less than that. So I guess my concern is, does that report really support some of the ideas we're floating out there? I'm not convinced that they are. And, you know, I would love to see a nursing home. I'd give 20 acres to someone to build a nursing home or skilled care facility in our town, or an adult daycare center. Is that what we really, is that the population we really need to be helping? You know, so I guess I'm with Mike in that I'm not comfortable in asking for an RFP when we're not clear what we want in that proposal.
Yeah, and I think those are fair comments. I would just add, before we open it up for additional comment too, we do have the Housing Task Force that spent many, many months looking into this issue and came out with a recommendation that there should be a mix. It shouldn't just be age restricted, it shouldn't just be family, there should be some type of mix of projects. We also, I believe, have the LDS market housing study from the consultant who came back and said, you don't have the demand in your town to build a senior-only facility. You also don't have the demand in your town locally to capture a family-only facility. So they recommended a mix as well. So that's 2 documents from kind of professional organizations that have looked at this issue that are kind of giving us what I view as the guidance in which way we want to go, which to me would be a mixture of these different types of products, and not just senior, even though I do think seniors need to be a very significant portion of whatever we build. My concern is that by just focusing wholly on seniors, we're going against what the market study indicated we should be doing. And 2, we're also neglecting a huge portion of the population that you just talked about that could be a young family making less than $60,000 a year or $100,000 a year. And so I don't want to disregard them just because there may be concerns about other issues. They're all important to me. And so I think we need to make space for all three groups as part of any future project. But that's just my opinion, but please, Councilor Bell.
Two things. I think the consultant that was here this evening from Westbrook Housing Authority, his one example really struck out at me. If you take away high-end housing, it forces the market downstream. So there is no lack of high-end housing or the people who have the money to come into this community and buy and build high-end housing. That's never been a problem. As long as I've lived in this community, there's been no lack of people who come into this community with money and either have bought up farms or built estates down on the Foreside or otherwise affected how they wanted to impact their personal change in this community. So we can try to narrow down or broaden out the request for the RFP, and we can say, well, that doesn't match my desires, and that doesn't match my desires, and we might not get there. But I think that if we allow the RFP to go forward with the broad brush strokes that I see, and that everybody else perhaps can chime in on, we can come back and see what the proposals actually look like. There's nothing that says that, once that RFP goes out, that we've committed ourselves to a course of action. And I said this, 2 years ago, this is an opportunity for us. This is not a limitation, and it's not a indictment, or it's not a decision to spend any taxpayer money or do anything like that. This is an opportunity for us to see what can be done. And, we may be surprised. We may not get anybody come back with anything. The market may not provide that. But that being said, in Sunday's paper, and Shirley said she read that, if a guy can do this down in Wells, I'm convinced that there's an opportunity here for us to do something in our town. And I think that, as much as I'd like that nursing home too, and that elder care facility, that continuum of care, we also need to address workforce housing and the opportunity for young people to move into this community. All kidding aside, when I went on the school board 22, 23 years ago, I used that opportunity to come down and try to shoot down a building project that was before the planning board because of the criteria that had to be signed off on what was the impact on the schools. And I said at the time, the schools are full. You can't approve this project. Well, as it turned out, it had no effect. State law says you can't do that. You have no say in that regard. That doesn't mean that we just go build willy-nilly and force ourselves into stacking up school buildings left and right. That's not going to happen. But the fact of the matter is that developers will take opportunities for land that comes up for sale and build something here without regard to the schools, without regard to the impact on the traffic, the infrastructure. Developers work on what's best for their own back pocket. And so the obligation for, or at least the incentive for me, is to look a little bit further than that and look a little deeper and say, what can I do to make this community a better place?
Well said,
Okay.
Bob.
Councilor Kopp?
What we're talking about tonight is setting a public hearing, setting a date of August 28th for a request for a proposal. We're going to send this out to all the players in the game. These are the experts that do this, that will come back to us and say, this'll work, or this'll work, or this and this together might work. This is just a request for a proposal. I think we're asking the experts to give us advice.
Yep.
I think by setting the date, we may get 6 proposals. We might not like any of them. We might get somebody that comes in here with a proposal that says, why didn't we think of that? I think that's what we're looking at. So I have no issue with setting, and Mike, I know where you're coming from, but I don't know if they'll all come back and say that seniors will work, or that seniors won't work. But these are the guys that do this every day that we're asking them for their advice or their proposal. So I don't think there's any harm in setting the date, to be honest with you. That's just my take on it, so.
Any comments from the public on setting the date? There will obviously be,
I'm not going to support it just because I get nervous in our process that we get too far down the road and there's no turning back. You know, we get down and we're like, yeah, this is what we want, this looks great, and we don't take enough time to do the unintended consequences or the long-term vision. So I'm going to start now by not supporting putting it on the agenda, just because I don't want to be at that place where, geez, we've got this great idea and this company has already put in $40,000 worth of planning and effort, and they're the experts and we need to pay attention. I'd expect the experts would say, what is the impact on our tax rate? Not our kids in school, but our tax rate, because what would that do to the workforce housing that's already living here? I agree. I'd love to see more people in the workforce living here. But we already have workforce housing living here. You know, I have a cousin who's a nurse at the hospital, and her husband's an OT at the hospital, and they have 4 kids. What's that going to do to their household budget if their taxes go up $750 a half a year or $1,500 a year? Those are real questions, and those are the numbers I'm not sure people interested in creating a development are going to be able to give us. So I'm going to go on gut and intuition on some of this, and I don't want us wasting people's time.
thank you very much. Any comments from the public? Please.
Bruce Trowan, 292 Blanchard Road. Couple things on this. I never hear any talk, other than Shirley just did, about what this is going to do to the current taxpayers in this town, these projects. And that's a big concern. Your first obligation, I believe, is to the taxpayers of this town. That's who voted you in. That's who's put you in responsibility here. I don't think anybody asked you to grow the town. I think they asked you to take care of the tax thing and take care of projects that people bring up to you that they want to do. So my real question here, though, is the process is such that laymen like me do not understand this process. The 55-unit senior housing on Route 1, I think it's on Route 1, it's on the Forsyth somewhere, that is, apparently is on TIF, it's a TIF-financed area. I looked hard to find where that was voted for by the council and couldn't find it. It went through the planning board. So my question is, a project like this, what is the planning board's role in this, and what is the council's role in a project like this? Can somebody tell? And I think the people out in TV land need to know this, because we need to know when to come. And this is another question. Bob Vale said it, that when you move this land over to TIF, added it to the TIF zone, that was, quote, not a heavy lift vote. So I wonder, is tonight a heavy lift vote? When are we going to heavy lift vote going to be that we need to show up for? I think this stuff gets through the town without people knowing what's going on. I've asked several people, talked to people, they don't even know about these twin towers going up over here. So many people. So what is the process? Is this, you're going to vote on, what's the planning board's process? I thought they would do that.
So I'll happily start with this, but it sounds like we've got some comments too.
Yeah,
It's
I
my
think the people out there need to know
Yeah, no,
this,
it's my
yeah.
understanding that the planning board, their role is to ensure that any developers coming into town or any projects being proposed are done in accordance with our current ordinances. So they are checking the boxes to make sure, does this project, is it zoned properly? Are they following the guidelines? Are they following the regulations and the ordinances that the council as a policy passes? So that's their job. They're not policy functionaries. They're not deciding whether something is right for the
So,
town or
but
not.
But if they vote yes on it, that means the project goes through?
No, that means that it elevates.
That's what happened on
That
Route
means
1, I believe.
usually that it elevates to the council level where we would vote on approving that
I
project.
never saw, was
The
there a vote on
planning
Route 1?
board is, that's incorrect, Mark.
Okay,
The
please.
Yeah,
planning
I don't
board,
think that's
once,
right.
once a plan like a TIF district was set up on Route 1, it was set up as a contract zone, the particular project you are talking
Yeah.
about. Council approved that zone, and once the zoning is in place, then the planning board reviews those projects. Once the planning board approves it, it may move forward. If
Maybe
it-
what?
It may move forward.
Okay.
It can go forward. Like the project on Route 1, that zoning was in place through a contract zone agreement that's over 20 years old.
I know.
And that project will get built because it was approved by the planning board. This process right here is really at its infancy stage. It's not even at or ready for prime time yet. The council has to decide what it wants to build, if anything, on that parcel. And once it does, then it can change, then it can send to the planning board, we as the owners of this land say this is okay to be built here. And then the planning board starts its review process. This is in a senior overlay zone. It has different densities than other areas of town. And the twin towers that you talk about were an exercise to see what would be the maximum number of units that could be built in two types of different buildings. That's all that was. And we don't know if that can even be built. We have conflicting reports that say maybe a different type of project should be built.
So when are the heavy lift votes, so that we can be here for them?
Once the RFP is accepted and a developer is chosen to move forward,
Let's, for the people out there, what is an RFP?
request for proposals.
Okay.
So the developer will bring back the ideas that they have for that parcel to say, this is what we believe would fit best, this is what we believe we can financially do, and we'll work out financially as a project that could work. So we're not paying for these buildings. These people are working through state, federal fundings.
I know.
And they are in a TIF zone, which will encourage affordability. So we can participate in the infrastructure, we can participate in helping keep those projects affordable. And those projects, once they're approved, their affordability is locked in for 30 years.
Do you agree that the residents coming in are going to increase current residents' taxes? Do you agree with that, Bill?
No, I do not.
Well, you've got a letter from the Council of Governments, it's on the website, that says that's true. A letter to you from the Greater Portland Council of Governments that says that exact statement. When you have new residents come in, taxes go up. So I'm just telling you what I've read on the council, on the website.
I think we.
And I agree with it, you know? I agree with it. Taxes, because we've had a lot of development in this town, and taxes do nothing but go up.
Yeah, and
They don't go down.
And I think there's, the way I'm viewing this is that growth is something that is natural in communities that are desirable. People want to live in towns, and the opposite is actually worse, where people don't want to ever live in your town and everybody leaves and everybody's property values drop as a result. So growth, to expect growth to not continue to occur in some fashion in Cumberland, I think is an unreasonable expectation. And so the question to me would be, if growth is going to occur naturally in our town, do we want to make space for people at certain income levels? Because if you don't make space for them and create affordable housing projects, they are subject to the open market. And the open market right now, if you look at our home sale values and lack of rentals in our town,
Well, I think
is just simply not attainable
I
for
think
many
affordable
people.
housing is a target that you can't hit. It's a moving target, affordable housing.
Well,
The numbers.
It's linked to HUD data, and that tells you what an individual's income levels are, and
those
that will
numbers are
change over
moving
time.
all the
Of course,
time.
they will change over time, of course.
So you don't really.
But purchasing prices of goods change over time. It doesn't mean, and people still buy milk, but it's less than it was
So again, I
50
don't
years ago.
think it's the council's priority to increase the rate of growth in the town. I don't think that's good for the town. It's just not good for taxpayers. I think growth is going to happen. I'm not against growth. I'm against natural or controlled growth, not exponential growth. And I think, I don't think the town is with you on this, folks. If you would make this public, public enough so that people would know what you're doing.
I would argue it's very public. It's recording right now, and it's available for
Well,
people to see.
It's public, but people aren't paying attention. And the last week's forecaster did not have this agenda in it, I don't believe. Either this or the prior meeting. So, I don't know. I'm just, my taxes are pretty high, and I don't want to see them go much higher.
Councilor Vail.
I think there's a lot of people in that
During
boat.
World War II, we created a lot of housing in South Poland and Poland, and other communities for workforce housing. It was a war going on. So we have a history of creating housing as the need arises. And you look across the landscape of the country, and you can see all kinds of opportunities that failed and successful projects that happened for any number of different reasons. But government entities have chosen to put projects in.
We don't have the jobs in this town, Bob.
That's beside the point.
It is?
You have asked about creating housing, and, you know, we can sit here and we can do nothing,
Yeah,
and that's fine, you know? I don't choose to do
I'm
that.
not saying do nothing.
I'm not going to sit here and do nothing. I'm going to look to the future. I'm going to try to make an opportunity for my community. If I fail, I fail, but I'm not going to sit here and do nothing.
The only thing, Bob, is you're putting the cost of this on to the taxpayers,
I have
not
not
yourself.
done that. I have not done that. When we have a
This is gonna cost
concrete
taxpayers big
proposal
money.
before us,
Yeah.
when we have a proposal before us, part of that analysis that we've done by this board is what is the cost, if any, to the community?
You haven't done that.
We haven't done it because we don't have a proposal. But when we have a
You've got
proposal,
one down on that you're building down on Route 1.
I'm not building, that's a private development down there.
I know, but it's gonna increase taxes here. So anyway,
Anybody that buys a piece of land and builds a house on it and has 8 kids is gonna cost the rest of us money, right?
Bob, you
That's-
don't listen to other people. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Bruce.
But no, I'm not done. When is the heavy lift vote gonna be so I know to be here and so I can tell other people to be here? This is not a heavy lift vote. Bob, is this a heavy lift vote? That's what you called the one at the, when they made the TIF zone fix. That was not a heavy lift vote, according to you. Is this a heavy lift vote?
I don't believe it is.
I don't either, but when is the heavy lift vote gonna be?
When we have a real project presented before us and we have some real costs that we can,
So is the
Evaluate.
28th the heavy lift vote when we authorize the town manager to go forward?
we won't
That's
have
not,
anything before
I
us
think
then.
Shirley would disagree with you, but anyway,
Did you have
I
something?
think it is a heavy lift vote.
Councilor Douglas?
Yep, can I
Thank
ask
you.
you a question? What is it you prefer that we do then?
What's that,
I said, what is it you prefer that we do?
that we do?
Yes,
That
because
we-
you just said to Bob Vale that,
Oh,
I guess not
I've already
doing
said what I prefer you to
what,
do.
can you walk me through it one more time?
Oh, I'd like to, Bill Shane brought up that we don't have the social services in this town for, to do with that person that is having health problems. But in general, we don't have the social services in this town to take care of people that are low income, that need services.
You realize that elderly people also need social services, right? Like, there's
Oh,
all
I'm-
types of people that need social services.
Yeah, I do.
Anyone in this community can
But
need
we've
them.
said that we don't have them. We're gonna have to ramp them up with more people. I'm not saying we shouldn't have them. I'm
Okay.
saying they cost something. And having more police, we're gonna have more crime. We're gonna have crime problems out in that sardine factory that I'm calling it.
I think that's an
People are too tight.
assumption.
They get into
Yeah.
tight things. You know, you look at Westbrook and towns that have grown, that's where crime problems are.
Okay.
They're coming with too
Thank you.
fast growth. That's, again, this is my opinion. I don't expect everybody to have the same opinion. You may not have the same, but one thing, major thing I think we need to do is, the task force and the council and the planning board, nobody's looked at what is this gonna cost taxpayers?
I think we'd like to get an assessment of what it costs, but we can't get that without putting out an RFP. Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna hold you to getting one then, okay? If you
That's what
said-
we'd like to vote on, is to understand what this costs,
Yeah.
right?
I'm not
And
talking
what-
about the cost of building, I'm talking about
No, I
cost of
know,
services.
the taxes, I understand.
Is it gonna increase police? You can do studies about this. Will it increase police? Will we need the police to build a police station because the police force gets bigger? I know that's been a topic.
So one of the things too, and I think these are large macroeconomic questions that
know.
you're talking about, which is
gotta
fair,
consider 'em,
right?
though.
Right. No, that's fair. I think another thing to think about with these projects, these aren't if something comes to us and it looks like it's a project that we want to move forward with, this isn't being built overnight. This is something that can be phased in over time. Certain groups of housing are built first, the other ones are built next. So this isn't an overnight situation where, boom, we have all of these new units up and running. So I think it's complex to try to figure out what that effect would be on the immediate tax base. But by doing nothing, I think the concern is that we're exactly where we are, probably in a worse situation with affordability, with the lack of affordable rentals. Right now, about 20% of our renters in town are paying more than 50% of their income in rent. That leaves no money for saving for down payments, for healthcare, for anything else. Food, with the cost of everything is. So something needs to be done, and I personally view that that's the role of government, is to try to figure out how can we take care of
I agree.
the
if
folks
you,
and
if you
make
can
this structure
concretely
work.
help them, but I think it's a little bit of pie in the sky. This is a moving target you're trying to hit. It's a moving target. It's
But
not
that's
going to
what
be
we're
the same target when you
trying.
do it.
We're trying, right? Like, we're putting ourselves out there to try.
Yeah,
And I think
agree.
that's,
I think it's much easier to
yeah.
hit a moving target when you're doing a little bit, not a lot.
we're not doing a lot, though. We're trying to get the proposals.
Let's some of the
I
folks
think it's a
have
lot.
chance
I
to
think it's a lot in this
questions here,
town.
please.
Thank you, Mr.
It's a
Sherman.
small town, so, but again, when will the heavy lift, when do I need to be here to?
I think it depends on
to
what.
fight the battle.
So I think it depends on what you view as the battle or the heavy lift. I don't view them as that at all. Tonight, I view this as setting a public
Yeah,
hearing
I
date
don't
for
think
2
this
weeks
is a
from now
heavy
to
lift
ask the
tonight.
manager to go out and issue RFPs. That will take some time for those RFPs to come back, assuming that passes. So once those RFPs come back, we need to review those, figure out whether those projects make sense for us in our town and serve the needs of our community. And then if they do, maybe we get to a point where we actually vote on one of those proposals. We interview the individuals that put them together. And if we decide to move forward with one of those projects, maybe that's the big heavy lift vote that you would like to come out to.
And then does it go to the planning board? Or do you guys have the final say on that? I don't understand the
you have
process.
the final
We would
say on
always-
the project.
Yeah, we would have the final say on the project,
Yeah.
correct.
So, and it also hasn't brought up tonight, and maybe this isn't the right time, but what's gonna happen to the ball fields? I mean, you don't need to answer that now.
So
but
those are all
it's a
part of
topic.
that proposal.
Yeah.
Where do they go? Where are they moved? What happens with that? Those are things we need RFPs to determine. We're not contractors, we're not, except for
Yeah.
one of us, excuse me.
Yeah, well, anyway, the major thing is, what is this gonna mean to the taxpayers of Cumberland? It's a
Understood.
big deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
This
I
is a
hear your
big deal.
concern. I feel your concern.
So,
And I don't think the taxpayers are with you on this.
thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. I respect what you're trying to do, but I honestly think that you're not discharging the role that you should be discharging in having a future vote to authorize the manager to create RFPs. There's so many facets to this issue. There are the number of units to be constructed. There is the income level of the potential renters. There is whether or not there's genuine protection for people with connections to the community. You guys need to lay out a vision of some kind that, I mean, so somebody comes in and says, we can build this really great project, but it's got to be 200 units, and you've got this nice town forest right here. How about if we go that way? Or somebody comes in and says, I can do some really great Section 8 housing, and I can draw from the greater Portland community, I guarantee you 100 people in town. I'm not saying any of those are bad, but I've heard, comments about the Affordable Housing Task Force work. The central tenet of most of our recommendations was a revitalized Cumberland Housing Authority and a professional who was working within the structure of that authority to try to bring expertise and help projects and provide sustainability to affordability and the like. There's been no talk about that. We had recommendations of it. We identified a need of 150 units in town at the time of the report. We identified a sort of spread across the community with the project down on the Four side representing about 50, about 50 being up here, 50 being up in West Cumberland. There's a framework there that I think would have relevance to your conversations, whether or not you accept it. There's room here for a lot of things to happen that are positive, but I really urge you to become more specific in your recommendations and bring an RFP to the table before, the manager simply is given some loose guidelines to go see what people think. Thank you.
Thank you.
As you know, I never speak at these things. I want to correct a couple of things.
Can you please state your name and where you live?
Do I have to? Janice Spalding, West Cumberland.
Thank you.
And two things. We need to do our part. In the past 12 years, the town of Cumberland has built 558 new households, structures, 20.6% increase in households in the town of Cumberland. Same period of time, North Yarmouth built 18% additional households. That is the direct result of what's happening with our school district. We've done our part. In that same time period, Yarmouth, which is an equally lovely, people want to live there, lower taxes, better services, arguably a better school, 1.4% household increase, 50 households. We've done our part. Mr. Eads spoke several meetings ago outlining what we've done for affordable housing projects. It's not nothing. It's been part of various projects over the years, correct? Significantly. We've done our part. I'm not saying we shouldn't do something. We have other issues that we need to solve. Whatever we need to do, or whatever we do, has to not exacerbate those issues. We have a looming revaluation. We all saw what happened in Brunswick. Is terrifying for anybody who lives in a house that was built more than 10 years ago in this town. Guaranteed the houses built in the last 10 years are worth a heck of a lot more than mine. I've seen the houses surrounding me. My neighborhood, Skillen Road, Bill will tell you, has flipped twice in the 7 years that I've lived there. One senior has moved out. She was replaced by a 30-something professional who has now left because she can't afford to live in this town. Her house is now being rented to a family of 5. Wasn't a senior, it was a 30-something. My neighbor was a 30-ish single mother. She couldn't afford to live in this town. She sold her house, was purchased by somebody on the 4 side, it's now a rental, family of 4. She now lives in Gray. You're driving out, I sympathize, the only reason I'm standing here is because I sympathize with this gentleman and the attitude he was getting with the, what do you expect us to do? We're terrified of losing our homes. I bought my house 7 years ago, $219,000. Cumberland, $219,000. Identical house next door to me, sold for $400,000. I know what my revaluation's gonna be. I'm terrified I am not gonna be able to live in my house. Not every senior in this town, and I'm not a senior, even though I fit under the age, whatever the program is, Aging in Place program. Not every senior in this town has a paid-off mortgage. Not every senior in this town has a pension. The average Social Security in the state of Maine is $1,700. You bought my lovely little house, $200,000. You're gonna end up paying $400, $500, $600 in taxes. That's a huge bite out of Social Security. So stop thinking everybody in this town is wealthy. Stop thinking every senior in this town is just paying taxes. Stop thinking we can all afford a little bit more. We can't. We're worried about losing our homes. We're worried, I'm picking up a second job, for Pete's sakes, this fall. Why? I make a really good living. I'm a 1-income household. I bought a house I could afford in a town I wanted to live in that I presumed I was gonna be able to afford until I retired. I'm 7 years in, and I'm now looking at, should I stretch it back out to a 30-year mortgage? I'm gonna retire sooner than 30 years, maybe 15. So I urge you to look at the numbers that you published, for Pete's sakes. 20.6% growth in the past 12 years. I looked at, just out of curiosity, because those numbers started in 2010, at the annual report from 2010. That town council talked about the extraordinary growth in Cumberland, which was over 20%, which was far exceeding the state of Maine and comparable towns. It's us. It's something we're doing. People want to live in Yarmouth. People want to live in Cape. People want to live in Scarborough. People want to live in Falmouth. And yet we far exceed their growth. Why? So I urge you to, one, respect the fact that people, we're terrified. We're absolutely terrified of hanging onto our homes, being able to afford our homes. I wrote you a long letter, and I have said, I will do whatever it takes to maintain my home. I'm very smart financially. I will mortgage the hilt out of that thing to stay in that house. My 81-year-old mother has lived in Cumberland for, I don't know, 1964, however many years that is. She will die before she gives up her home. I'm terrified of what's going to happen in the revaluation for her home on Greeley Road. We can't afford a $100 million school. We can't afford, from that 20.6%, if Bill's numbers are right, about 30% of the town having children in the home, that was about 300 kids right there. This project, 110 units, if 30% of those are families with, name it, 1.5, 2 kids, how many kids in school is that? We haven't even solved that issue. We haven't even built the school yet. Whoever said we're not going to stack school on top of school on top of school, of course we are. Of course we are. Yep. So there's more to solve than lower income folks, which we're not talking housing for homeless vets or asylum seekers or people making the Maine average of 60,000 or whatever it is, median income. We're not. We're talking $1,800 for a one-bedroom apartment to $3,000. My house, the house next door to me, is a rental for, I believe, $2,600, 3-bedroom home. This isn't affordable housing. But what it's going to do is further squeeze the district, which is going to squeeze taxes, which is going to put all of us right where we are now, which is afraid of losing our homes. So I urge you to respect. I understand the frustration. I know how tough this has been. But you have to realize where we're living, which is we're not all wealthy. We're not all, I'm under $100,000. I'm under your median income. We're stressed, we're panicked, and we're afraid, and respect that. Yep. And find solutions for the people who live here. Find solutions for the school district. You know my feelings on getting back control of that 70% of the mill rate. Find solutions for the people who voted for you to be in office so that we can continue to make this the town that it's always been and that it will continue to be.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing all that.
Arnold Klugman, Bradbury Way. I think the town council is acting irresponsible. You don't have a clear, concise, defined set of objectives to send out an RFP. Without giving that to the town manager to send out, you're trying to build a car by saying, I want something that'll take me someplace. Is it a plane? Is it a car? Is it a bike? You have to create a defined set of wants so he can request different adaptations of that. And an alternative to central planning of what to do for housing is very simple. It's called supply and demand. The government doesn't control it. The economy does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think one of the reasons, to that point, one of the reasons we're even having these discussions is because the free market is making Cumberland extremely unaffordable. Every home that goes on the market, if it's valued more, will be bought out by families receiving income on national levels that can work remotely now as I think the city of Portland is talking about the GPCOG was talking about over the next, I don't know if it was the next 10 or so years, 5 years, 21,000 new units of housing will be needed just to support the growth of the new jobs that are coming into Portland. I think about when I see that B&M bean factory being torn down when I drive to work every day, and I see the progress being made there as to what that's gonna look like, what that incubator lab is gonna look like, and all the professionals that are gonna wanna move in to go to that school. Where are they gonna wanna live? They're gonna wanna live in Cumberland, and they'll have national salaries, and they'll buy out families that can't afford those. And my concern is if we do nothing, that free market, which is wonderful, does wonderful things, can also have very severe consequences for people in certain income brackets as well. And so I appreciate, and I just want you to know, I hear everything that folks are saying, and I appreciate you coming up and speaking. I know that is not easy to do. And I think getting an RFP together will help us further define what that is. I think we have what we need to ask developers to come back to us and say, what are you even financially able to build? You know, what does the economic study show is supportable in our town? Is it just seniors? The report that we had said, hey, I don't think you should just do a senior unit. Is it just families? The report said, I don't think you should just do family housing. But you clearly have a need for more affordable rental housing in your community, and it should be a mixture of those. I know other counselors have shared their positions that they would prefer senior only. I respect those positions. We've talked about it quite a few times. I think that's great. My concern is that what that does is it opens up all of these other homes that are just gonna be bought out by folks from other states. And it doesn't make space for, we know there will be growth in the future. And so why would we not make another seat at the table for folks at a certain income bracket so they can afford to live in Cumberland? Because if you leave it to that market, they will not be able to afford to live in our town.
But they don't have to.
Correct, they don't have to, but I think there are a lot of studies that talk about the diversity of economic backgrounds and how that creates a better, more livable community for all folks. So with that, this agenda item, unless there are any other public comments, the agenda item is to set the August 28th date as the date to request the manager to issue an RFP. Do we have any other council comments? I know we have one counselor who appears to be abstaining from the vote. I believe we have one extra public comment. Please.
Scott Jordan, Cumberland Foreside. Is there an actual framework with your request based on your, the meeting that you had prior? Do you have a framework for this RFP? It sounds like so far what I've heard, there isn't. I mean, that's what I've done for a living is RFPs, and it doesn't sound like there's an actual framework for this.
If I understand the agenda item, the request is for the town manager to prepare an RFP, not to issue one.
That's not what I'm asking.
So your answer is no, but it doesn't align with what the request is for the agenda item.
But you have, Mr. Representative Vail, Councilmember Vail, you have to know what you're asking the manager to go out and ask for. To Mr. Klugman's point earlier, are we asking for a bike, a car, a plane, a rocket ship? Are we asking for a high-rise? Are we asking for affordable housing for senior? You don't.
So I would argue, I think that's, I understand the concern there. I do think we have enough data to start preparing the framework for an RFP, which is what the agenda item is asking the manager to do.
What's the RFP for?
So
What is it for?
What is feasible? Yeah, what is feasible what is feasible affordable housing that you can actually financially develop? I mean, because if it doesn't pencil out for a developer, they're not gonna move forward. And so if we said, hey, we just want family housing here, maybe a developer's, and we say, hey, we want it at this income bracket. Maybe a developer comes back and says, that's not financially affordable. We can't get the tax credits that we need to be able to make that project financially sound. And then we have the policy considerations of, do we just want this to be senior? I think there are some folks on the council who say, yes, I would support that. There are others on the council, such as myself, that would like to see a blend and a mixture that aligns with what the consultant said we should be doing. So again, it's about what can you create where you receive the tax credits that make something affordable that aligns with, again, what the consultant recommended, which is a blend. It's also what the Housing Task Force recommended, which is a mixture.
So from a safety perspective, so I live down on the Foreside in the 45 lot development, Mr. Manager, you know where I'm at. We have the market rate apartments are literally right next to to our house. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Manager. At the very end of that street, our street, there's gonna be the senior housing potentially to be built.
55 units.
Right, so I think our average house in that development is somewhere $500,000. You put those senior housing in there, tell me if I'm wrong, our housing, it's gonna go down in cost, appraisal at some point, correct? You would think, right? The more apartments you continue to put in that area,
So
the value of our house is going to go down at some point.
but I would argue that your asset is fundamentally different than a senior restricted.
You're surrounding us with
Townhouse.
apartments. And not on top of that, the crime in there, or the potential crime. I mean, my wife at 9:30 at night had somebody coming up on our steps multiple times. Chris Kennedy, a state trooper, had people coming up on his steps at night because people were dropping off Uber Lyft meals because they couldn't figure out how to get to the other side, when all you do is drive around. You're creating problems that don't need to be there.
So the problem that we are seeking to address is the fundamental lack of affordable rental units in our town.
Have you been to Portland?
I have.
Do you see what's going on in Portland?
I do.
And you
We-
want to bring that to Cumberland?
We are not talking about, and it almost sounds like you're implying low-income housing and equating that to crime and drugs, which I would reject.
It does. It does equate to that.
What we're talking about is affordable housing. And affordable housing, as some speakers have mentioned, is kind of a moving target. It depends on which group you're going after, which AMI, area median income level, you're going after. And so the consultant has looked at this and said, hey, I think there's a little bit, and we'll go through a presentation in 2 weeks, but the consultant has looked at this and said, hey, I think there's a decent need at the 30% of AMI level, but there's also a really huge need between the 80 and 120% AMI level.
What about the generational families that have been here for generations that you're going to force out of here because not for organic growth, but man-made growth?
So I think all growth is man-made growth, if you want to call it that, all right? There's a developer that comes in and builds something. What I am viewing this as, and I hope other counselors as well, they may have different opinions on this, is that if that growth is occurring, why are we not involved in being creative and having the foresight to figure out how do we make space for these folks at certain income levels? Because
It's not your job, Mr. Segrist, Chair Segrist. It is absolutely not this council's
it is
job.
it is our job.
It is not.
It is.
Absolutely.
Because many of these units will be, the goal here is to have many of these units utilized and captured. There's a capture rate that is studied as part
So
of
let
this.
those people move into your house. Take care of them.
I think that's a fundamentally different analysis. What we're talking about is
It's
saying
not,
if there are people that are struggling to pay rent currently at market rates, this would provide them with a secondary option that is more affordable to them,
absolutely not.
which serves
Data
their
has shown
interest.
that.
We just got a very large economic report that showed us that there is a need for that in the town, and that's what we're basing it off of, is a professional economic study.
You're missing the point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Do you know in this process if there's a plan to have a neighborhood meeting for the people around here? Because when Kevin Bunker first made his proposal for down on the land where the brush dump and salt shed are, we had this whole auditorium charrette thing, and we got some interesting feedback. So I'm just wondering if there's plans for a neighborhood meeting for this.
I mean, I would imagine at some
ideas.
point when again, we haven't even issued the RFP yet, but at the point a potential project even comes forward, I do think a neighborhood meeting would be appropriate, personally. We're just not there yet.
Okay.
And so I think that's a fair request. But I just don't personally view us there yet.
I
Please.
swear I'm not going to make a habit of this. I have a question. I read the whole report that you're speaking of, and correct me if I'm wrong, the identified need among renters was, if I'm remembering off the top of my head, 16% of households in Cumberland were rentals. The identified need was 19% of that 16%, correct?
So in Cumberland, there are currently 30% of our renters are paying more than 30% of their income in rent, which would be known as being rent burdened. 50% of them, or excuse me, 19% of our renters are paying more than 50% of their rent.
So my question is, you're proposing this, addressing this need based on, and I'm not saying the issues and concerns of 19% of 16% is not a big deal, but you are basing this project which will attract students into the school, will affect taxes, so on and so forth, on 19% of 16% that you are aware are paying 50% or more of their income. What percentage of taxpayers, property taxpayers, are paying 50% or more of their income in mortgage and/or taxes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have that data in front of me, but
Okay.
that's controlled by the market, right? The market will dictate what interest rates are, what your mortgage terms are. That's not something we can change.
But should that not be a concern of yours, since
Yes.
taxpayers are the ones who, or not just taxpayers, because renters also voted you in, but residents voted for you? Should you not be aware of the overall financial stress of all voters or all residents of the town of Cumberland before proposing a project to address the concerns of one relatively small segment? Second, also based off that report, they identified a limited senior need. They were looking, correct me if I'm wrong, at renters, not households.
No, I believe they were looking at all households' income levels. So
I read the report, and she wasn't just talking about our town, it was the general area of seniors looking for rentals, which, if you're looking at Cumberland, is hard to identify, because clearly we don't have a ton of rentals, with the exception of Hawthorne Court, and similar properties. So there's a very small pool to know. We know, she also, and I do know this for a fact, was completely unaware that there was a significant waiting list and a lengthy waiting list at Hawthorne Court. And correct me if I'm wrong, there is also a significant waiting list for Drown Road, correct?
That is incorrect.
No longer? Oh, I used to know people who lived there, and there was a waiting list.
But those things, those would support I think what you're saying tells me that if there's such a long waiting list, that there is a need for senior affordable rentals, right?
But as Mike Eads very nicely pointed out the last meeting, and Mr. Kopp also pointed out tonight, his mother thought it was great to live in a townhouse with the support, so on and so forth. It is a huge, I ask any of you, what do you envision for your retirement? There are certainly people who want to move into apartments, and fourth floor balcony, super, great, wonderful. How many of you is that your vision? How many of your neighbors is that your vision? Is that your vision? I mean,
No.
I picture sitting in my backyard on my lawn chair, tending my garden that I've planted for 20 years. And if people want to move into apartments, they should absolutely have that option.
I think-
Because they want to.
Yeah, and no, we're
Not
not
because
forcing
we've
someone.
made it impossible for them to remain in town. You have to understand, and again, 19% of 16%, I'm not a mathematician, I'm a journalism major, I have no idea what that comes out to as an actual percentage of the town. I'm guessing, I don't even know, 6%, 8% of the town. You're going forward with a transformational project based on an identified need, region, state, need rentals, great, on a small percentage of the town without knowing the impact on the remainder of the town, or even knowing what their financial stress is. And I would ask you, before you do anything that's gonna raise the mill rate, whether it is school bond, whether it's this, whether it's anything, I don't care what it is, you should understand the fiscal health of a majority of the people in this town. There should be a survey of all of us, not 19, just 19% of us.
Councilor Vail.
You raise
Great point, yeah.
a valid question, because the school is not going to ask you what the financial health is if they build a $70 million school.
They're not building
It will
70
just
million.
come down to a vote, a vote.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you find that this group here hears you, and we'll answer that question. But there's a vast difference between $70 million of taxes on your tax bill that will most assuredly, you'll feel that pain. We'll all feel that pain. But we will analyze what the impact of any proposed project is going to be on the taxpayer.
You should know it now. If you did the survey of the renters, you should survey them all.
I
But
think
my
you
point
didn't
about
hear
the
us
school,
earlier.
the point of the school, you're not responsible for the $70 million or $100 million or whatever it's going to be. You are, and past town councils and select boards are responsible for the pressure and the enrollment. That's the role that the town council plays. This will, any project will, any building will add to that pressure. There's going to be more student enrollment at some point. This school, if it passes, will max out, and there'll be another school. We know it. But that said, 110 units, assume 30% are families, that's a pretty significant jump right off the bat. It is.
Where did you get that 130 unit?
110, did I say 130%?
She's referring to the initial concept sketch when it was trying to figure out how many units could logically fit on the Drown Road facility.
And if you look at West
Anybody here has
Cumberland,
an appetite for that many units?
110?
No, I don't think anybody here has an appetite for that many units.
Correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it 2 buildings of 55 each?
It was
it's a
to show
concept.
what the maximum could be built. One was senior, which was all senior. The other 55 were families. Yep.
I think getting the RFPs back as to what these proposed solutions could be. It could be this type of a building, or it could be this single building with a mix of maybe townhomes around it, and those townhomes would be the family units, where something else would be senior, or vice versa. We are not developers, and so.
But the developer should be working for the town, I won't say you.
They are.
In that, we want to build a fire station. This is the footprint we have. Tell us with your expertise what would work on this footprint. You're basically saying, we have a footprint, we want to build housing, tell us what will work.
Right, which is the same as the fire. What
They're
would
not
fit
going to
on this
tell
space?
you, your identified need, you're not identifying a need, you're basically saying we want to build a building. Your identified need is, we need affordable family housing, or we need senior housing, or we need X, Y, Z. And to Shirley and Mike's point, you haven't defined that yet. If you ask a developer, they're going to tell you, for example, if it's senior housing, it's going to be a very different building than if it's family housing. There's different needs, wider doorways, handicap accessible, so on and so forth. If you haven't given them those parameters, why would they come back to you with a proposal? If you haven't identified the need, that this is what we need, why would they come back to that? If you're identifying need as families, you're going to want play space and this, that, and the other thing. How can they come back with a proposal that meets your need if you don't know what your need is?
I totally understand where you're coming from. And again, I think if you read the language of this agenda item, it is to ask the town manager to prepare a request for proposal. That topic will be batted around. We will discuss that and figure out what that mix is. Some counselors say, this is easy, build a senior housing, that's it. Some counselors say, we would like family. I think what the report is telling us, that we have an immediate need for additional affordable rental housing, and we would recommend that you not do just a senior unit, and that you not just do a family unit, because the capture rates for your community, i.e. how many of the actual local residents do you think you'll draw into this space, it isn't supportable. And so a mixture is what that consultant recommended.
I wish I had my phone. I wrote down quotes that consultant said. The things that she said that stood out to me and were alarming to me was, this was to attract people outside the community, attract new people is how she said. She recommended against seniors so you could get maximum rents. It wasn't that you don't have the people that move in or there isn't a need for seniors. It was to maximize rent. It was families from outside the community. She was, and understandably so, was looking holistically at the region, and there is a huge, huge need for housing in the region, unquestionably. Every community should do their part. Every community should be doing what they can that works within their community. Cumberland has done what's in their ability. You've built 20.6% new households in 12 years. You've done your part. We've done our part. We're stressed to the max because we've done our part. We can't be the answer to every community. And I'm not saying we never build. I think the 55 units on Skyview, great, fills a need. I'm assuming they're high rent. I think Ocean View was brilliant. You know, Bill and I argue a lot about TIF zones. I thought that was a fabulous use of a TIF zone. We have needs. Our town councils and town managers' job is to address the needs in our community, not to address the needs in the region, if addressing those needs in the region are going to harm our community.
Thank you. Councilor Eads.
I really appreciate the statistic information. I think that's
Love
huge.
stats.
You know, the fact that we've increased our buildings by 26%, that's huge, huge. But I'll go back to the first point I made. We as a council need to define this RFP, not Bill. Bill works for us.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we, you know, if I was in the towing business, I would not just say I want a wrecker. What kind of wrecker do you want? I want this, I want this. I'm looking at this type of towing business, whether it's commercial vehicles or whatever. We haven't defined anything to send him forward to draw up an RFP, and that's, if this was strictly to go out, Bill, and do this all on senior or do it mixed, maybe I could vote for this tonight, but this is so unknown tonight. And to ask the manager to draw it up when this isn't the manager's RFP, this is ours. We need to draw it up. So I'm going to stick with where I was at the very beginning of this conversation. And if we had a specific model to send forward, then you'd probably have me, but you don't.
I think like lots of really great points across the board. Where I am kind of on this, I mean, from my perspective, we're in information gathering phase, right? And I think there has been a little bit of, I think there is some nervousness that I'm hearing across the board, which is like the second the train starts going, like the train's not going to stop. And personally, and I know maybe I have to show this, not just say this, right? But I always go back to budget season because we go through things line by line, and there's a lot of diligence and there is a lot of homework that we put in as a council, and there are a lot of conversations that we have to make sure that we're looking at the data that we've gotten, whether it be the GPCOG study or this LDS study that we've gotten. We do get a lot of data, and sometimes we have to cross-reference it, and sometimes we have to kind of put a lot of that together, which I think Mark is kind of in the process of, you know, taking all of that data for us and, you know, putting something together that's going to give us better tools to make sure that we are making the right decision. Sorry, I'm being a little long-winded, but what I'm trying to get at is, at least for me, we're in the information gathering phase, and not being a developer, also not understanding they're dealing with really complex funding models, right? The developers, in terms of how are we going to get money for this AMI. And I think for me, this is also kind of an exercise with the RFP of understanding what a mix would look like, what senior housing would look like. Maybe it's just workforce housing, or maybe, I don't know yet, right? Because we haven't seen those RFPs, and we don't know what the cost is going to be, and we also don't know what the impact is going to be on the taxpayers. So for me, it's just another milestone in the information gathering phase. You know, originally we thought that we were going to be in the 60% AMI area, and then we did the study, and the study came back and said, that's bonkers. It's probably better to be closer to the 80 and 120 or 80, 100 to 120, right? And so I think that taking the next step to gather more information, from my perspective, is kind of the next logical step. And I think that on top of that, when we get to a point where if we do find a plan that we do like, we're going to be having those neighborhood meetings. We are going to be sitting down with people, and if the process hasn't been clear, I think that we are more than happy to sit down and kind of talk that through, you know, and so that so that we all understand and we're all on the same page and there's full transparency. So yeah, I'm in favor of at least setting the date for the 28th to open that up to developers so that we can at least just take in that information, analyze it, look at it, and decide as a council whether or not we think that it's a good plan, it meets the needs of what we need, and if it doesn't, then we don't have to do it. Over to you, Shirley. Or actually, sorry,
Please.
that's it
go
for me,
ahead.
Mark.
That's fine.
I hear you too. I'm just wondering, when are we going to have the conversation about the information that we have? We haven't had that conversation yet. You know, I've shared what my thoughts, what stuck out of that report to me. I have 3 pages of what stuck out of that report for me, but we've not, even as a council, had a conversation about that. So I guess that's my concern there. And maybe other people didn't see the same things jump out at them that I shared with you, all the things that jumped out at me, but I haven't heard from any of the 6 of you what jumped out for you. You know, one of the things I'm looking at my page 44 comment, there are potentially 745 family and age restricted units in the study area that could be competitive to this project. Did we all read this, or did we all, you know, I mean, we discussed it with the author, our last meeting. We had her come on and say some things, but we haven't talked about it, and I've been hoping that we would have a chance to sit down and go through it, what sticks out to us. And I think Janet's point was interesting in that, you know, this is Cumberland, and she's looking at the broader area. This is a researcher. This is someone who gathers statistics and diagnostics, and she analyzes it from Massachusetts. What are we seeing on the ground here in Cumberland, and what in that report sticks out to us as individual residents of Cumberland? I mean, before we move forward, we haven't even had that conversation.
Mr. Manager, did you have a comment? Okay. Okay, so we've discussed this quite a bit. It is on the agenda, and so I think we need to move forward with some type of action. I would like to personally see us prepare some RFPs. Did you have comments, Councilor Cobb?
I just have a question. Is this date something that we have to do, Bill, or is this something that we can put off so that we could have a workshop? I mean, rather than sit here and argue for the last 45 minutes, why don't we, the 7 of us, have a workshop, sit down, discuss this whole thing, and see if we can come to a consensus on where we want to be, what we want to build. There's nobody in this room that's more conscious on tax bills than me. I got 8 of them sitting on my office right now, and they come every 6 months. I mean, I'm as aware of taxes in this town as anybody is. And am I going to build something that's going to impact the tax rate on this town immensely? Absolutely not. But there might be somebody that comes forward with a huge plan that really works, that makes sense. I think the right thing to do is to table this and have a workshop where the 7 of us meet, discuss what we want to do, and go from there. I mean, I'm not against this whole project. I think there is a genuine need for some workforce housing, some elderly home, and whatever. But we need to discuss it as a group and come to a consensus where we want to be. And I mean, I don't want people to think that I'm pushing something down the road, because I'm not. I mean, I think this is something that needs to be well thought out, and that we all have the same consensus that, you know, yeah, let's do this. I mean, I've listened to a bunch of testimony tonight, and a lot of it makes sense, so.
My concern with us performing the workshop, even though I think that's a fine idea, is that we're throwing numbers that might not line up with what a developer would say would work out, right? We would say, hey, do 30% senior, do 30% family, do 30% workforce, young professional, whatever you want to call them. that might not work for a developer. So whatever we come up with as those percentages are as arbitrary as them doing the pencil math on the back end. I mean, we can say what we want. Again, we're the policy directive here.
But Mark, if we're not gonna get what we want, then why would he put it out?
Because there may be,
If we come up with and said, we want 30% this, 30% that, and 30% that, and a developer can't do it, then I don't, you seem so desperate to, you have to develop something. Let's get a plan, a mutual plan or a majority plan, send it forward, and if a developer doesn't want to do it, then we don't do anything.
Again, I want to make sure that whatever comes forward is right for our community. I want to make that very clear. That said, I think we have reports from professionals that say what you should be looking to try to build.
Our professional didn't even know we had a waiting list at Hawthorne Place of 125 people. Completely ignored that, or I shouldn't say ignored it, was unaware of it. And does that skew the numbers one way or the other? I don't know, maybe. But she was totally unaware of that. And we seem to be ignoring that huge waiting list that we've had. I can tell you, for the last 11 years, we've had that waiting list with no movement and no help to those people. So anyways, I gotta go along with Ronnie. I think until we as a council develop something for a plan to give to Bill, have Bill come back to draw that RFP up, and then if nobody's interested, nobody's interested.
Mr. Manager, how long does it take to draw up an RFP for something like this?
Not very long. But you guys have bounced around these ideas for over 2 years now. You've got a legal opinion on local preference. So we know we can do almost the same thing we did with Drown Road. We have the ability to customize this project at 30, 40, 50, 80, whatever numbers you want to predict at the average median income. And then you need to know what type of credit enhancement agreement these developers are going to require. That will be part of the RFP. What is your requirement to make this project affordable for the community? And then we already know where the wetlands are. We already know what the land space is. We just give them those plans, and they come back to us and say, under the criteria you have developed and discussed, this is what we can provide to the town, and these are the rents that we can provide in those categories. I think you can do this again in 2 weeks. I think you could do it again in 6 weeks, and you're still gonna have the same arguments, and now you're gonna have the same discussions. But until you get the experts to tell you that you guys are, dreaming, this is just not possible, or just there aren't programs available for this to pencil out for us, we won't know. We're gonna basically spend a lot of time arguing about what we can and can't do versus what is possible. And to me, what is possible, we're not gonna know until we ask folks that do this professionally, that have the resources to state and government programs that we don't. And we have been told right here in this room by Maine State Housing, don't have the town of Cumberland apply, your application will be rejected because you don't do this. And you heard tonight, Tyler said, this is what they do. This is their wheelhouse. This is how they operate. So they know what programs to deal with. The $850,000 available through the banks in Maine that have gotten together for affordable housing projects is available to developers like the folks we had here tonight. So it's not available to the town of Cumberland because we're just not in that wheelhouse. To Rick's point, we're a long way from getting to that place where a housing corporation could take over this, similar to what Westbrook does. Our resources are all here internally in this building, and everybody chips in to make that a very successful project. To do what they're doing is, we're not there yet, and we're a long way from that. But for me, the RFP isn't the issue. If you have the will to do this, then I think we can proceed. The 28th, we could have a lot of information, but the primary bullets I look at are, what do you want for affordability to include? What does that look like? Is it a percentage of senior, or is it just a mixture and then let the market deal with it? at the apartments down on Route 1. I think we're close to 35% seniors there, and we only required, I think, 18 or 19% as part of the requirement. It'll take care of itself in many regards, and 55 and over a senior isn't a high bar anymore. So for me, I think a lot of this you're not going to know. You're trying to plan for something that we don't even know if it's possible. These developers may come back and say, after those numbers I heard tonight, Mike, with the housing costs, they're double what they were 3 years ago when we started this process. So what is available that we don't know? And how do those loans work for these developers? A lot of these loans are basically interest only, and if they keep it for more affordable years, if they add another 20 years on, a lot of times the principal is forgiven. That's how come the private sector can't compete with this group, is because the cash available to them are through federal and state funded programs to help with affordability and the housing crisis we face. So I'm ready to go anytime you tell me to go, but I'm going to tell you, I don't think we're going to be any further in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 6 weeks than we are right now. So that's where I'm at.
Please, Councilor Story King.
I still want to know when we're going to talk about this report. You know, we're talking about all these ideas, but, you know, for example, you know, on page 23 of the report, from 22 to 27, there's a projected increase in the 25 to 44-year-old population of 13%, which goes counter to what we think about young families coming here and staying here. And it kind of goes against what we're getting for, you know, what the school's saying. We see a decline of 10% for school-age people on page 23. We haven't had a conversation about the details in this report.
Councilor Bell, you have a comment?
I'm ready to move this ahead. We can have the conversation about the report, but I think that as far as the work ahead of us tonight is to set a public hearing for August 28th, and I'm not sure that any further discussion. I appreciate Ronnie and Mike's comments about sitting down and describing criteria and parameters. And I thought that would be time well spent, but I think really what I want to see is the developers come back and say, this is what we can do, and that's going to really determine how we move ahead with this. So, let's get on with it. So if you're ready, Mark, I would make a motion.
I am. Please go ahead.
I move to set a public hearing date of August 28th to consider and act on authorizing the town manager to prepare a request for proposals for an affordable housing project to be constructed on the town-owned property on Drown Road.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second to set that public hearing date for 2 weeks from now. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? 4 to 3, I believe. Did I count that correctly? Okay.
Do you want us to raise our hand for opposed?
All
Maybe
those
someone's
opposed, please?
abstaining, I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, thank you very much, Shirley. 3 opposed, 4.
Good discussion, everybody.
Thank you for everyone in the audience for vocalizing your concerns there. The next item on the agenda is 23090 to authorize the issuance of senior property tax assistance program payments. This is what Whitney Miller discussed at the beginning of the meeting tonight. It looks like there was 211 individuals, if I'm not mistaken, that have applied. They expect that number to increase over the next few months, I think until October when those deadlines are due. But this is simply to authorize the council to issue those payments, which I believe the numbers are in our packet, and she reminded us of again. 69,000 total refunds, $69,284 for owners, and then $11,642 to renters. and that's 211 residents, totaling $80,926. So if there's not any discussion, I would welcome a motion to approve those payments. We have a motion from Counselor Kopp.
Second.
Oh, he's fast. Fastest gun in the West, Bob Vale here. And motion and a second.
East.
Yeah, in the east. Which direction is this? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Nope. Seeing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, that concludes legislation and policy. We now move to new business. There are upcoming Mr. Manager, I don't know if you wanted to actually speak on these, we talked about it briefly.
We just basically put together a schedule of holidays coming up, and we just need some direction on where you'd like to go so people could have advance notice. I have September 25th as Yom Kippur on it, but officially the holiday ends at sunset that day, so technically the 25th at 7 p.m. would no longer be observance of the holiday. It would be over by then. And then the second one would be Indigenous People Day. Historically, in the past, we have met on that day, but it's kind of hit or miss. Many families are away. Many families plan a long weekend for the calendar, and we have been criticized for having business on recognized holidays. So we're trying to avoid these in the future, and I just need a little direction if you'd like to push that to the Tuesday, the 10th, or leave it as it is, and that's why it's on your agenda tonight, following your direction to publish those holidays like we have.
Anyone have comments on that? I have my thoughts, but I'll let you go first, please.
I will just say for Yom Kippur, you are right on the nose, Bill, and 6:33 p.m. is when the sun sets on the
No
25th.
workshop.
The only thing is culturally, folks often break fasts with their families following, but if they, I think that the observance of the actual kind of 24 hours or sunset to sunset, from my perspective, is okay. I don't know if anyone else has feelings on that, but.
To moving it to after
No,
sundown,
to-
or to
I
moving
think
to the
we're-
Tuesday?
I think we're okay to keep it as is, because we're within those parameters of tradition.
Anyone else have comments on those? October 9th, how do we address that?
It's up to you. Do you want to move it to Tuesday, the 10th, or do you leave it as it is? I'm just trying to give you enough notice to know if we're going to have a council meeting so you can plan accordingly and the public can plan accordingly as well.
So, yeah, and my personal preference, and again, we can discuss this, but would be that we have that calendar for a reason, right? To indicate that these are the days that we should be watching out for, to recognize them as larger holidays, whether we celebrate them individually or not. And I would also like our meetings to reflect that as well. And so I personally would think moving both dates to a Tuesday instead of a Monday would alleviate that need for someone to be celebrating something and then immediately have to drop that family celebration and run to a town council meeting. I'd like to give them that full day regardless of when sunset is. That's my personal take. Just to make sure that our meetings are lining up with those calendars and we're recognizing that in practice as well as on paper. Thoughts? Okay, so my direction would be, unless anyone else has another comment, would be to move both of those dates to a Tuesday in observance of those holidays.
Okay, we will change the calendars accordingly.
Thank you. Now, new business, starting at my left. Councilor Kopp, do you have any new business?
I'd just like to give condolences to the Biscup family, Mike Biscup, who has worked in this community for many years. I got to know Mike probably 10 years ago very well. Just a great guy, done a lot for the community in every aspect. Died way too young, passed away, I think it was last Friday night. I mean, just terrible, terrible, tragic. Guy was just great guy, I mean, and certainly will be missed.
He also worked at CV in Mahar for many years. He was very active in Little League here.
Right.
He was a coach and ran the Little League for a while,
Yeah.
at least a certain division of the Little League. He was a great community man
Yeah.
and just a great family.
He actually was working for Slocum Custom Builders, where my oldest son works, and just couldn't say enough good about him. I mean, just would do anything to help anybody. I mean, and he worked at the board barn in West Cumberland for a few years until that closed, and just got to know him, and just a really good guy, so he'll be sadly missed. My friend Dean has donated $20 to the 4-H food pantry, and I'm going to give my $20 to the food pantry as well, a very worthy cause. The Cumberland Fair is coming back up. Before the meeting, Councilor Vale said that the Lions Club is looking for some money to finish their new booth for the Cumberland Fair. So I would like to make a donation to the 4-H, to the Lions Club, very, very worthy cause, one of the best ones in this community. Here's $50 to give them, Bob. And I expect you to match it, so how's that go? You asked, now you have to receive, so.
Ouch.
Money.
And that's all I have.
Great, thank you.
Very
Counselor
worthy
Cobb,
cause. So
as,
if
Counselor
anybody
Vale
would
is
like to-
digging deep in his pockets here.
If anybody would like to donate to the.
How convenient, you had a $100 bill.
Yeah, yeah. You want to donate the whole thing?
Yeah.
Good man.
I know who's buying lunch next.
That's painful. There's $100. There's $100. If anybody has an opportunity to go up to the fairgrounds and see the new building, it's
Beautiful.
it's
It is
very
cool.
impressive over what was there,
And I just want to make a comment too. I mean, if most people go to the food and you buy fair food, you can actually get a very good meal at the Lions Club. So, and you don't have to worry about what you're eating. So, very good cause. If anybody wants to donate, see Bob Vale.
thank you, Ronnie. Thank you. I only have one item, really. We get regular mail from Maine Municipal Association, so we had a meeting here where we chose a new interim or a one-year appointment for school board. And during that process, I reviewed our conflict of interest law, and I had Brenda reach out to the town attorney who sent me something. And anyways, I would like to have us, or the council, the ordinance committee, sit down and develop a conflict of interest policy. I think we need to have strengthen it. As my wife said, the state's conflict of interest policy is the floor, not the ceiling. And so I think that there's an opportunity here for us to, and I think that Councilor Kopp's actions over the year have set the high bar of anything that even smells like a conflict of interest is enough for him to stand aside. And so, anyways, I'd like to have a review of that, and either the whole council side in on this or direct the ordinance committee to look at it, but that's all I have. Thank you. And thank you for your support to the Lions Club.
Thank you very much. Counselor Filson.
I have nothing this evening.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Douglas.
Yes. Just wanted to start it off by thanking the Parks and Rec Department for all they did, along with Angela Stone, for the Twedsbrook. I thought it was hugely successful. Definitely showed a need in the community for more of those types of events. One question I have for you, Bill. The future is electric vehicles. What is our plan long-term for charging stations around town, if any? The other thing I wanted to bring up as a suggestion or potential for conversation is North Yarmouth has a living well committee as opposed to aging in place. And I think it's something we should explore because it encompasses kind of a greater population in the community. And we can have subcommittees that are focused on more specific groups. And they can all kind of work together to combine resources and really be thoughtful for our entire community. And then that's all I have.
Counselor Eads.
I've just got just one thing. I want to thank the council for the last couple weeks for your support, your private messages, phone calls. It was a stressful week, and you guys are very a couple weeks. You guys are very understanding. And what I'd like to do is, in in dedication to my buddy Pete, I'd like to do what I do every year, is donate my quarterly stipend from the council to your purchase for the food pantry. That way, the whole thing will go, instead of getting taxed, and I'll dedicate that to Pete. Other than that, thank you very much.
Counselor Story King.
Just a couple of things. I attended a meeting at the Prince Memorial Library week before last. These 3 weeks get me confused. And they have a space study underway. Just looking at all the spaces, it's a given really that there's not enough room at the library for all the programs the library is providing. But this space study is to sort of get a better handle on what it is exactly that we're going to need. So I went to that. And I would also like to extend my condolences to the Biscup family. Little fun fact, I'm related. I know that, for most people, there are 6 degrees of separation, but Pat Palmer, my old principal, said for me, or she goes, for you, Cheryl, it's only 3 degrees. My husband's cousin's married to his brother, so we know Mike and his brother Bob very well, and his sister-in-law Mary let us know recently that it happened way too young. He was out kayaking when it happened, and visiting hours are Thursday if anyone's interested, but that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you very much. The only 2 items that I have, I appreciate the Twinsbrook. Thank you. I also would like to thank the rec department for all of their help in making those a success. Also, Whitney Miller tonight talked about that tax rebate program. I want folks to really know that if you meet those requirements, which I believe are 70 years of age or older, you've been in the town for longer than 10 years, and your combined household income is less than $91,000, you should be applying for this because we do have funds available to rebate back those. Again, that's a program that's kind of authorized through state statute. Also, in terms of neighborhood meetings, I do think those are great. There is a neighborhood meeting, just as a reminder, on Wednesday, August 23rd at 6 p.m. That the Cumberland Town Council will hold to discuss the 4-way stop at the intersection of Route 100, Range Road, and J Brothers. The meeting location, I believe, am I stealing your thunder here, Mr. Manager?
No, perfect.
The meeting location has been moved to the Recreation Center at Valhalla, and your attendance and participation would be greatly appreciated. Again, that's on the 23rd. Just 5 days later, on the 28th, when we have our council meeting, there will be a public hearing to consider and act on the recommendation for the 4-way stop. It's expected that the new intersection could be installed as soon as late September, and the engineer's recommendation will be posted on the town's website by Friday, August 18th. And that can be found, again, on the Cumberland Town Council website, or Cumberland Town website. So again, the 23rd and the 28th, so mark those in your calendar if that's of interest to you. That is all I have in terms of new business. I want to thank everybody on the council for a really good discussion, and thank everyone in the public for coming. I encourage you to continue to come as these dates move forward. And with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr.
Second.
Chairman.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.